Hello and welcome to Wild Soul Gatherings. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie and I'll be your host for Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. I'm very grateful for all you wild souls out there who've decided to join us today. I want to send a special thanks to each of you for taking time out of your day to join us and our guests as we talk about the many aspects of spirituality. To receive updates on our latest episodes, please subscribe and follow Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. A positive rating and comment is always appreciated. In the tradition of Happy Hour, cheers to some new insights, peace, revitalization, perhaps an aha moment that will positively influence your life. Welcome to Wild Soul Gatherings podcast in this episode of Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious.
Ooh,
I have today with me award-winning author Sonee Singh. It's great to have you here. How are you doing?
It is great to be here. I'm actually doing really well. It's a beautiful day. We've had sort of weird weather for the last few days, and today is finally sunny and beautiful.
That's nice. I'm down in Florida where it's supposed to be sunny and beautiful, but we haven't quite had that weather yet. And then I was talking to family up in Ohio and they're having that 90-degree sunny weather. So it sounds like there's just a whole lot of different going on. Yeah. So just to catch the listeners up, Sonee and I met back in 2019. I'm usually really bad about dates and times. The last person I talked to, I said, well, it's been about 5 years. She's like, Sandra, it was 2008. I'm like, okay.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know what it is with the energy and the time. I really am losing track of time more and more. Honestly, it just has become more unreal with me. So I was gifted the opportunity to meet Sonee on one of the most magical trips that I personally have ever been on. And that was when we were in Egypt. And honestly, that could be just a whole separate podcast of things that went on. And definitely one of the things that attracted me to at that time, and I actually have a picture of us together, was you had the make love great again hat. Yes. Like, I need, yes, this is the energy I need. And it was definitely the energy I needed for the trip.
Yeah.
So since then you have written 2 books that I know of, possibly a third that's coming out on poetry.
And oh my gosh, you have it. Yay.
I do have it. And it's probably backwards, I'm sure, on the
No,
screen.
It shows perfectly.
Perfect. So this is called Embodied, and it is your first book in a series of poetry books.
It is. I've got all 3 here. So you're actually going to get an exclusive because the third one is not out yet, but I have the proof copy. So yeah, all 3.
Awesome. Beautiful. And for the listeners out there to learn a little bit more about Sonee and how to get in contact with her, you can look at our show notes, and I will have all her information and her books in the show notes. So I am just curious. I love the book, I have to tell you. And just because we're doing the video, and I know most of what I have done is all audio, but what, let's see what magically opened, because you know, the
solar plexus, there you go.
Be out there, right? Yes. I love the artwork in it. When I first got the book, I was really excited to, read and see what you were doing. But I have to tell you, I'm very visual, and I just was the little child in a picture book, looking at all the different artwork. And I love the watercolors and how that was dispersed in there and how you use the colors. That being said, tell me a little bit about how the concept came up, how you got to writing these. And
yeah, so we, yes, we absolutely, we met at a most magical trip. I would say a life-changing trip for me. I think I'd been on this road of awakening, quote unquote. It's probably not the best term, but just becoming more open and more aware. And as time went on, and particularly after that trip, I started allowing myself to do things that I hadn't before. And one of those was just opening up to my creativity. I had begun writing a novel, but I was still very insecure about it, very unsure about my writing journey. And in fact, that novel's coming out in September, but that in and of itself was a whole different journey. With the poetry, it seemed that at the moment that, the lockdowns with COVID hit, I was in a space where I was now open to being inward and exploring a lot of, either things in my life, emotions in my life, and it came out in poetry. I didn't expect that was going to happen. I didn't intend for it. It just did. Before, I think before the end of 2020, so I started writing poetry in March, roughly March, April. I actually don't remember when the first poem kind of came out of my thoughts, but it was around that time. By the end of the year, I had 170 plus poems. I mean, they poured out of me. I started, and it's almost as if I couldn't stop. And then I have a friend who works in the publishing industry, and I was just sharing this with her, and I was like, I had a stack of like just handwritten poems, and I said to her, I don't know what to do with these. She was like, I know what to do. And so that's how the books came about. And so the three books are, in a way, my journey through navigating those first couple of years, not couple of years, but first few months of COVID, year and a half, really. The journey that I went through, the emotional journey, Embody, Embrace, Embolden. And that was just kind of opening up myself to what I was feeling. That was the embodiment. Accepting it was embrace. And then kind of finding a way to move forward was Embolden.
So really, all three series play off of each other.
Yes.
Oh, interesting. I've heard so many it's interesting how the COVID really affected people in a lot of different ways. I think it's safe to say that it's changed our world and our cultures dramatically, because people did have a time to pause and self-reflect and really sort of either find a passion or reflect on their current state. And is that something they wanted to do, or did they want to move over? But it's interesting when you said that the information just poured through you. Mm-hmm. So when I hear you speak your words, and, I listen to people talk about how they sort of turned off a little bit and just settled from all that goes on in the world during that particular period of time, it's almost like, I think innately there was a lot of other things going on that were awake. I think awakening is a good term, actually. So I like it. I just recently talked to someone who we recently just did an episode, and I used the word evolved, and he said he didn't like the word evolved. He actually has moved on from evolved to awakening, and sort of talked about what that meant to him. So when he was talking about the awakening, it did make sense. And I think many of us have been on a journey for a long time, but we're at different levels of awakening, which, seem to be happening in hyperspeed with the energy and things that are going on right now.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about the colors in the artwork and how you came up with that.
So the idea of the mandala, or the mandalas on the covers, that was a lot of kind of the signs and symbols that I imagined when I was writing the poetry. I cannot take credit, though, for the actual design, because these were designed by separate people. So one lady did the three covers, and the interiors were actually done by another woman, Ida Jensen, who essentially, and so the covers were, and I should name her, Jennifer Dinsdale did the covers, but the interiors were Ida Jensen, who literally just took the poems and kind of ran with them. And she did a fantastic job. I mean, I didn't really have to give her much guideline. She ran with it. There was only a couple of things that I came back and was like, oh, maybe you should use this color instead of that color, but it was all her. So she did it.
It feels like it was really actually a collaborative experience, because she felt the energy and could feel your intention, I think, of what came out in the writings, which is because the artwork in it really does match up very nicely.
It is a beautiful visual collection. I mean, and that's what I think the magic of what has come together in these books, that I didn't intend for them. I didn't create them with that purpose, and just kind of finding this collaboration where there was essentially very little exchange, very little back and forth. I mean, she was sent the poetries, she came back with the designs, I gave a couple of things back and forth, and that was it.
It was like they're a pictograph of the actual words. It's like, if you're into educating, they talk, some people learn tactily, some people learn visually, and it's like you captured all of that with that. So in this book, you use the chakras to describe your journey.
Yes.
Did that just come with you, or what was the intention behind using the chakras as a pattern?
As the poetry started coming, I didn't see the chakras, like it wasn't a natural thing. It was afterwards when I was putting it together. The study of the chakras is something that I have always with me. It's something that I do in my meditations on a regular basis. So it's almost like it lives with me. And so it felt very much when I started putting the poems together that and that's probably part of the awakening, it kind of starts with your first chakra and moves up. And so that's how it especially with Embody. I mean, the other two don't have the same theme. It's still about cycles and signs and kind of our connection with ourselves and the universe. But the chakras for Embody, I thought was, in a way, an organic and natural way to describe what I was going through without having that being the intention. It's just, when I reflected back, I was like, oh, look, I went through an awakening.
So it's funny when you say that. I literally was just going to use that word, and my comment was, I'm surprised to hear you say that because it feels so organically connected when I read it. Mm-hmm. I almost felt like it would have been the other way around. So it's because they fit so, it's just fits very cleanly with that. Do you have a favorite in here?
A favorite poem?
Uh-huh.
I do. And it was a poem that sort of took a lot from me. And it's actually quite simple. It's called Why Me? For those of you who are on page 78, in case you want to read along.
I will.
And I'll give you a bit of background. It's just, part of this whole entire process was also about accepting a lot of the things that had happened to me and getting out of what you might call a victim mentality. So this is what came out. So it's called Why Me? Why me? Why not me? I've had nights of cold, days of cold, moments of cold, cold for days, cold to last a lifetime, yet I seek the light. My skin yearns for it. Scales grow thick from its lack. I thought nothing grew without light. My scales grew. How was that possible? My scales grew in search of what? Light peaks. They cease to grow. They shy away. They cringe. My scale sees. I am pleased. Why not? Why me? Why not me?
Wow. It's beautiful. Honestly, I feel like every single one of the poems in the book related to me in some way.
Oh, wow. That just gave me goosebumps.
It just was that special, and I know this, you've been working on this for a while. I have been, this whole Wild Souls gathering, the retreat and the podcast, not so much, but the retreat part of it, for me has been something that's sort of been out there with me for decades, but I never really embraced or put action to it. Mm-hmm. So more recently, probably, actually, now that I think about it, at the same time you were writing your books, interestingly, I was actually actively looking for a piece of property, looking to actually put this into creation, a place where people can come, a place where people can turn off, a place where people could sit, read poetry together, talk about it, and not have to deal with all the external things, and really talk about, their spiritual journeys and connection. Because it was amazing to me. I don't know about you, but I just ended up on that trip by myself. It's like it was a group of people that I felt so connected with, and I still feel connected with, even though most of my connection is through social media and those kinds of things. It was like it was a journey of something that was meant to happen for sure. So it's interesting you were doing this at the same time. I will say that with the COVID. With the thing with COVID, I have heard so many stories similar to yours, and for me personally, at first I was going to say it sounds selfish, but it's not. It's just what my journey is, and I know I'm not alone. It was really just the opposite. It was probably one of the most intense couple of years of my life. I was in New Mexico. I was on Navajo Zuni reservations. They were one of the first in our country to get hit, other than Washington State. That was a bad situation. So a lot of people in the country weren't understanding what other people in the country were experiencing. But it was there was no time to honestly really reflect on anything other than, being out there hustling and, making decisions you didn't want to have to make.
Mhm.
So it's interesting how the same event affects people differently. But I did also have a favorite in here. And I will have to tell you, by the time I reached out to you and we set up this interview, I probably had 3 or 4 favorites, but this was the favorite of today that I'm reading, to be honest with you.
But the same thing happens to me. It depends on when you ask me, I'll have a different favorite one.
Yeah. So this is on page 182, and it does have similar colors to the one that you picked, and it's called 5 Things. And I thought, oh my God, this is like life in one poem. So it says it's 5 things. There are 5 things, actions we need to be who we are. One is to summon our parts, collect all our pieces, and then put them back together. 2 is to step into power, not caring for judgment, to exercise our will. 3 is to light that inner flame, trust ourselves, to listen to the guiding voice. 4 is to express what we have, authentic inner truth, to open to others. 5th is to embrace life, all that it takes and provides, to love what it makes us. Living fearlessly and in trust, love and strong confidence to be who we are. It is like this has been my journey all in one poem. Like I deal with judgment. I work on that every day. I've made a lot of progress, but it's still an area that I work. It's everything, the action, the putting it together, the different pieces, the inner flame, and it just ends so perfectly. It's really being this journey of who we are, which is so much more than the physical being, and, the spirit and, mind, body, embracing it all and recognizing all of that. So I just want to thank you for what you're putting out there. And I'm really eager for other people to be able to expose themselves and open up to it. I think this is a book that is life-changing that a lot of people don't know is out there yet, but they will.
They will. And the good thing about it is that, this, just to say, like, this hardcover version is supposed to be the coffee table version. It's like the collector's edition. But there is going to be, hopefully in the next month, soft cover, which will be black and white. So it'll take away from a lot of the impact that the color does, but people will still be able to see the imagery, and it's probably going to be priced half of this, because this is, I would say, almost an investment for a book.
But it's beautiful, and honestly, I'm very tactile. I love the way the cover feels. It's got that nice, soft, cool texture to it. It'll meet, and I think it'll translate well in black and white because of the simplicity of the graphics in it. Will translate nice. It's really, when I think about it, it's so in-depth and comprehensive, but yet it's so simple at the same time.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about then the second book. You said it's a little bit different from Embodied.
It is. So this is Embrace. Embrace is more about the cycles of life. And so, as I got from Embody in terms of going through this ascension, not ascension, but awakening, is the wrong word, but maybe not. The kind of following step, you could say, was just accepting. It was part of saying, okay, this is where I am. And so I reflected a lot on just life in general, where I'd been, where I was going. And so for this one, the inspiration for Embrace is kind of looking at the 12 signs of the zodiac, also the cycles of life, like the Buddhist life cycle. And so it takes a little bit, in terms of the way that the poems are categorized, not the actual content. It's a little bit more like astrological in that sense, and just reflecting that. And so it's different. You'll see a kind of a progression, even in my experience, or in experience in general. This one is very different. This one is more kind of like, Embody is more internal. Embrace is more sort of like looking at myself and life in general. And then Embolden, do you want me to get into the third one, or should I?
Yeah, well, I was going to make a comment on Embrace, because we've done a couple episodes. One of the co-hosts is an astrologer. So when you started talking about the cycle, and, currently there's just a lot happening in the skies and with the energy, and, we're here at a very specific time. It's not something generations get to experience. And as you spoke your words, and then you brought up the astrology, and I'm like, it's the cycles, it's the pattern. Right now we're in the beginning of a new pattern of different things. So it's all either we stay where we're at, and we're going to be in that for a period of time, or we're moving down some new and different paths. But I think you and I are doing at this time. So I love the astrology part of it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's the themes. It's not necessarily.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. It's not an astrology.
Although book. I do talk about some astrological signs, mine in particular. I'm a Capricorn, and there's a couple of poems in there about Capricorns.
Fair enough.
But if you want, I'll read you a poem from here.
Okay.
It's not necessarily my favorite one, but it's just, I think, very interestingly relevant to our conversation. So it's called Forcing.
Okay.
And it says, I mark my understanding of the world in the midst of my skin burning. I review the many lessons learned. There's no point in fighting. It only brings out more anger, more frustration. There's no point hiding. That only isolates me, and makeup rubs off. There's no point sharing. It only brings unwanted attention, unsolicited advice. Listening is the key. It brings understanding. I can only soothe and calm. Peace will evolve on its own. There's no point wondering how or why. Acceptance leads more quickly to a solution. It is happening. It simply is. There's no point forcing.
Well, you not knowing what's going on in my life right now was just like a message from the heavens. So thank you. And thank you. That, for me, that was very timely. It's, beautiful. Nice. You gotta love spirit.
Yeah, you've got to love spirit. And I will want to share, just because of our trip in Egypt. So Embolden, which is the third in the series, that one is divided in 5 sections, and that's because I connected with signs and symbols and talking about spirit, how the universe kind of comes to us, what messages they send, and whether we're willing to listen or not. And so that one is divided based on symbols, nature, purpose. Now I actually forget what the other sections are, objects and places. And on that one, I actually wrote a poem about Egypt.
Oh, okay.
It's a short one, but it said, Egypt. I heeded its call. It infused me with its deep wisdom, its ancient spirits. Thoth tapped me with his knowledge. Sekhmet destroyed the demons I held. Hathor lovingly nourished me back to myself. Every vibration of its sand, every drop of its water, every touch of its wind, satiating my yearning, caressing me back to life.
Wow, that's very meaningful to me. Definitely a trip. So moving away a little bit from the books, I would like to just ask you a little bit. One of the intentions of doing the podcast is, there's a lot of folks who are out there and they're on the journey. Some are really well on the path and, just open and sharing and looking. But a lot of people seem to be, we'll use the term waking up. And our culture and around the world actually is, if you have that network of people that you're talking with. So the idea of it was there's a lot of different ways to get to the same place and the same aha moments. So if you feel comfortable, could you just share a little bit about your spiritual journey? Was this something that you innately as a child knew and that was sort of nurtured, or is it something that you sort of stepped into more in adulthood? And what did that look like for you?
I mean, spirituality has been in my life always from the moment I was born, I think, mostly because my family was very religious, Hindu. My father in particular has a very kind of deep spiritual religious belief. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of what happened, and as children, we tend to be more open. As we start kind of facing life, we start shutting down again. And so that was part of what happened to me as well. I think I had a really deep connection with everything around me as a child. And as I started growing up and kind of bumping my head in life, that sort of went away, but didn't completely go away because it was always in me. And I think life was pushing me in terms of trying to get me to wake up, and a series of different events happened. The last of which was I had very bad pneumonia at the beginning of 2017, where I had totally collapsed lungs. I was breathing out of like one little section of my left lung. The doctors, when I'd gone to the hospital, had said, "We don't understand how you're still alive. Like, we don't understand how you're still breathing." And I'd look at them like, "What are you talking about?" I'm still here. What do you mean? I mean, I'm having a hard time breathing, but and anyway, it wasn't necessarily during that experience, but I think coming out of it, I started reflecting a lot about just myself and what I wanted and how I wanted to be. And one of the things that, you keep on hearing people say, connect to your inner guidance, listen to your intuition, but I actually had no idea what that meant. And, I looked at it and kept on thinking, like, how do people do this? I don't understand.
Oh, yeah. I think you're not alone.
Yeah. And so, I remember just kind of in a moment of surrender. I think surrender is something that we strive for, but it's hard. But in just a moment of surrender, I just said, God, universe, help me figure out kind of how to find my intuition, how to listen to my inner guidance. And around the same time, and I don't necessarily believe in coincidences, I actually started writing. A lot of the writing that I was doing was stream of consciousness. And it was through kind of that process that I started opening up myself to hearing to my intuition. And, one thing led to another. I, in fact, met Sarah Wiseman. I don't know how her email came into my inbox or how I found her information, but I connected with her. And then it's because of her that I ended up in Egypt, for instance. Like, it just seemed like one thing led to another. Not because
me too.
She really?
Yep.
Well, there you go. And I had never met her.
Yep.
So it was just fascinating that all of these things kind of just one thing happened right after. And the more I opened myself up and the more kind of I started just embracing that, I did have a voice and that it was there and I needed to listen to it. And I learned how to listen to it, that, I just kind of evolved from there. And writing has been a big part of that journey. So that's why, hence the books.
I love it. And among some of my friends, it's always a joke. Coincidence? I think not.
No.
Everything is by design. And that's sort of fascinating, just in talking with you now, learning that commonality, that's both sort of how we got there for that trip. Certainly she's a special woman, and her teaching and what she does is definitely amazing. She's definitely influenced and impact a lot of lives. And actually one of my goals is to get her on the podcast one day.
So yay.
maybe I'll get the three of us on the podcast.
Absolutely. That'd be fun. Yeah,
definitely some interesting experiences that we had with her husband also in Egypt in one of the temples. So definitely interesting times. So do you have, speaking of Sarah, do you have any like teachers or authors or people that you gravitate towards for your, just when you're looking and wanting to learn? And
so I mean, Sarah is still somebody that I connect with on a regular basis. I don't necessarily speak to her anymore like I did back then, but I will either take a course of hers or read her books. And it's funny, kind of like what we were talking about before with the poems, that every day you shift. And I think also the same pertains with everything. Like, I may have read her books or things in the past, but when I reread them, I'm in a different space. And so it has a different meaning to it. But I also follow Kyle Gray. He is this Scottish man who does a lot with angels and crystal healing. And that's an aspect that I've connected with quite a lot. And again, he kind of came into my life or my orbit. I don't know him personally in any way, but I just connect with his material. But it was at the time that I started writing, and he was part of a writer's podcast.
Okay.
And so I heard him on the podcast and he immediately was like, oh, I think I need to follow him. And I've been doing that now for a few years. Rebecca Campbell is also another person that I connect with a lot. She deals a lot with the rose and kind of awakening through the rose, and she does a lot of very beautiful meditations. So those two are probably the ones that I gravitate to the most outside of Sarah.
I've actually heard of Kyle Gray. I connected with him through a Hay House summit. So you like crystals, huh?
Mm-hmm. I love crystals. I was going to say some of my crystals are slightly out of reach, but they're over there.
Yeah, probably to say that I like crystals is an understatement. I was packing up a house actually right after we came back from Egypt. I had sold my house. And so I was really looking at what is it that is the most important to me, that absolutely, if something happens that I really want. And it was my crystals. And I was really shocked because I literally ended up with 4 trunks full of crystals. Like, I really didn't know I had that many. And I'm not really sure how I accumulated them all. And they're not actually unpacked at this point in time. And I've certainly acquired, honestly, new crystals since then. The energy from them for me is very, very real. And a crystal to me is like a person. They're all very unique and different, and they have a personality and say, I want you to take me to work, put me in your pocket today, or they say they don't. And it's interesting, people who have connections. So even with like jewelry, I wear a lot of different crystals with things, and I can always tell people who feel the energy if they recognize it or not. Because some people I'll find them staring and they'll be like, I really like that necklace. Like, I can't help but look at the necklace, and it'll be really some very inexpensive piece of thing, but clearly the stone is speaking to them. So it's just sort of a little fun thing I do. The other thing I really love about Sarah Wiseman and her work that she does is a lot of times when you're getting into the classes and the spirituality and doing different things, it could be pricey. There's monies that go with that. It's sort of like with the healing energies and the modalities. And I know, a lot of places will do Reiki shares and stuff. So I know that it makes a huge difference in people's lives. And it always sort of makes me sad if there's people in need and they can't afford it, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things that Sarah does, and honestly was one of the ways that particular point of what was happening in my life, was she would offer these classes for like $10 or $15. And I just to me, it was like winning a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
They weren't just teaser classes. They were like the classes, and they were a series of classes. So I, am always grateful to her because she offered me and provided something to me that I probably would not have financially invested my money in at that time, because I was more in survival mode, to be,
absolutely
blunt about it. Yeah. So it's nice that, she does that, and she really covers a lot of different topics. So that being said, what's next for you? What's next on the horizon?
Well, I continue to write.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about this novel. So the novel came first, or the poetry books came first?
The novel came first. So the novel is something that I have been working on for about 4 years. Okay. I started writing it beginning of 2018. So it was one of those things of, part of my awakening was, and kind of in conjunction or with the poems, it was accepting myself, allowing myself to be me. And that meant accepting that I had always wanted to be a writer, and I just never gave myself the permission to do that. And so interestingly, even when I did start writing, I did it kind of clandestinely, in the sense that I didn't tell anyone I was writing a book.
You were coming out of the writer's closet, not the spiritual closet. Okay.
Yeah, although both of them seem to be really linked because they were happening at the same time.
Okay.
And it's been a journey with the book. I mean, I think, the first time I finished the first draft, I should say, was just to see if I had it in me to write a book. I didn't know, this wasn't something I studied or whatever. And so I really didn't know is my story worthy of a book? Do I have even enough words to cover a book? And it turned out that I did. And then, it sort of evolved from there. I found editors and people who helped me along the way. And I stumbled quite a lot and had to do many, many, many rewrites. And finally, it's going to see the light of day. And so that's coming out in September. And the story, interestingly enough, is about a woman who is seeking her soulmate, and she gets visions, someone, and she doesn't necessarily know who that is. And then she has to kind of reflect back on her life, face the facts in many of her relationships in order to figure out who this person is. But the book is really, even though it's a love story and seeking soulmate, it's really about self-discovery and accepting herself and believing in herself. So very appropriate to our conversation today.
Well, it is, and it does seem like that's a theme of what your gift to other people is. It's not only, it's just self-discovery. Mm-hmm. And that's a beautiful thing, because that's how we become in tune with who we are.
Absolutely. And the way that I look at it, even though this isn't necessarily how I intended, is just the way it's been kind of manifesting, is the poems are my spirit, are my self-discovery. It's how I share what I've gone through. And the novels are fictional, because I've now continued writing and have others that are in the works. And it seemed to me like, because this has been such a momentous thing for me, sharing that with others and showing how others can do the same is really kind of what my stories or my writing is about. And so even the story that I'm working on now, it's this woman who is going through claiming herself. And so interesting, in the book, she is an ad executive who then decides to quit and become a tarot card reader.
I love it.
So, it's I feel very connected to that topic, something that I write about a lot.
Okay. I love it. And certainly your success, and you're willing to genuinely get on your path and walk down it, I think is it's a way of modeling and letting other people know that this can be done, and it's okay to be yourself and take a chance.
Yeah. And that's I think that's what life is all about. That's, what we're here to learn is we get so kind of wrapped up in this, what's our purpose and all this stuff, which it's not that I'm, minimizing it. It's not that it's not important, but really it's just, you feel the freedom to live your life when you accept yourself for who you are and express it, express who you are.
I love it. I love the message, and I love that you're giving this tool and opportunity to other people. Do you have any thoughts that you would like to leave our listeners with?
I would just say,
on the spot, right?
It feels like a heavy question too. That's
what I realized after I said it.
I would say feel the fear and do it anyway. I think sometimes we limit ourselves.
I love that. I need to write that down. Feel the fear and do it. Seriously, I need to write that down. I feel like that's an anthem.
It has recently become my anthem, in the sense that, even putting these books out into the world, it's nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking to put yourself out there. It's nerve-wracking to have other people see you. But once you do it, without any expectation of what the end result is, it feels good within.
Wrote it down.
Oh. I think like I might actually need to write it down myself, because I just forgot what I said.
You know what? I think I might use it for the title of the podcast.
Oh, wow.
But I mean,
there you go.
It clearly speaks to me. So just how would the listeners be able to get a hold of the books that you have out there published already?
So they're in different avenues. I think the best way, and I have links to all the places that you can get the books, is on my website, and that's soneesingh.com. So that's SONEESINGH.com.
Okay, awesome. And I will definitely include that in the show notes so that the listeners can go on our website, wildsoulsgathering.com. And that being said, I'm very grateful that you spent this time. I'm very grateful that you were patient enough to get through the technical issues that we had starting with this. And I'm hoping that sometime in the future, you would be willing to come back and join us again.
Absolutely. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. And I'm so glad we reconnected after all this time. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. And to our listeners, remember, please embrace your wild soul. Until next time.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank our guests for joining us for this episode of Wild Souls Gatherings Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. To find out more about our guests, how to contact them, or detail on this episode, please see our show notes. You can also visit us at our website, wildsoulsgathering.com. We would love to hear from our visitors what you thought of this show, what you would like to see and hear in the future, questions you may have. Go to podinbox.com/happy hour for the spiritually curious. You can leave either a voice or traditional message for us. This is your host, Dr. Sandra Marie, sending each of you peace and love. Until we meet again, embrace your wild soul.